Greetings, everybody. Back with another episode of the Left, Right, Left podcast with your handsome host, Mark Archabot, the Silver Fox, coming to you live from Prince William County, Virginia, United States Marine Corps retired Star Sergeant type. Hey, a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get going. 2 milestones to announce. First milestone is that, amazingly, this channel has just went over 10,000 subscribers. That is insane. I never thought that I'd have 10 subscribers. To put that in context for you, only about 4% of YouTube channels reach that mark. It's not about numbers. However, if you're going to do it, you want to have a nice crowd alongside you. So, hey, kudos to that. And we just went over 6 million views as well. So with that momentum, I would ask you to keep on pressing subscribes, likes, keep on tuning in, because every proceed from this podcast goes to the Amphibious Tractor Memorial, which I serve as a board member, and I'm awfully proud to do that. Okay. That is it for the housekeeping. Let's move on to this evening's guest. So I met this gentleman aboard Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. He was walking around with Sergeant Major Spud Spadaro when he was one of our guests of honor, and shook his hand. He told me who he was, and him and I just had really good vibes. And then he said, hey, I'll be in touch. And I'm like, hey, this is probably just another random guy who just, says that. It's a nice Marine thing to say. But then indeed he did. He contacted me every time he came to the Recruit Depot, say, hey, let's have coffee and break bread and stuff, to the point where he gave me this book, which is his book that he wrote, called Battle of Ramadi. He's a best-selling author. He's a Mustang officer, meaning he started out as enlisted and then commissioned. He retired out of the Marine Corps after 24 years as a major. Best-selling author, doing tons of stuff now as civilian, running a consulting group, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to let him fill in all the rest for you. My brother, Scott Huesing, welcome to the show, my brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love doing shows like this, man, especially with friends, because if you rewind the clock, like, I'm glad you told people. I met Huesing at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. Like, you weren't thrashing me in the pit, but that is where I did go to boot camp as well. So, when we met too, that was an interesting story, because everybody that does not know Sergeant Major Anthony Spud Spadaro, this guy, he reached out to me. I don't think you even know this story, so I'll share it. He was hitting me up on LinkedIn, and Spuds is a very well-read dude. So he had read my book, and I think he's probably sold or responsible for selling more copies of Echo and Ramadi than Barnes and Noble. He's just tireless. And so he hits me up on LinkedIn, and I don't know, we were pen pals, for lack of a better word. Like some people, I mean, we're Marines, so we know all the same people, but he says, oh, hey, I'm going to be down at the Recruit Depot, at this time. It's the same time we met, and let's grab some coffee. So I says, okay, cool, man. I'm going to go down and we'll grab coffee. Well, in Spuds' true humble nature, what he omitted to tell me was, well, when you come on base, go by the distinguished visitor quarters. His chief of staff, this Army Sergeant First Class, picks me up. She brings me coffee, and then he says, "Oh, well, we're gonna go see the morning colors go up." And General Heritage was the CG at that time, and so we're like in the front row. The whole pomp and circumstance. It's just a beautiful ceremony that a lot of people don't even get to see, including recruits. But Ryan Heritage and his wife and his whole staff are all good friends of mine and family. And then we had breakfast together. And then come to find out, Spuds is the reviewing official for the entire graduation. And then he says, hey, I got to go over to the auditorium. I'm going to talk to all of the drill instructors who are currently in drill instructor school. I go, I'd love to watch you talk, man. So we go over a packed auditorium with a couple hundred drill instructors, and he's probably talking on the stage. I'm telling you, Mark, he's not up there for more than 10 minutes, and he drops my name that like I'm some special guest. He gets me up on the stage to start talking to the drill instructors, which is a pretty cool experience, as you know, being a former drill instructor, and you've worn every hat practically on that installation. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I think that's where we met, through Spuds, who's an awesome human being. And, it was, when we met too, I knew like there was like a little bromance between me and you. Let's be honest. I mean, that happened. That's real.
Warriors. What does Spuds always say? Great ones affiliate with great ones. Warrior culture. This is what it is. I remember that, man. I remember when he pulled you up there and you were talking to all of us, and I was like, man. I was like, for a guy that's so accomplished as you, not just being a retired Marine, but all the things you've done since you've retired, you're a very humble dude and you're very genuine. That's what I appreciate about you. That's why I always answer my phone for you, because you're just that kind of dude.
Yeah.
Hey, man. So Spuds is just phenomenal. As you know, he's my battalion sergeant major when I was a drill instructor, and just we've always kept in touch over the years. Just a very, very good dude. So hey, shout out to you, Spuds. Hope you tune into this. That way you can help promote this podcast, same way you hope promoted Scott's best-selling book. All right, Scott, tell everybody a little bit about where you're from, and tell everybody a little bit about your service, man.
Well, I grew up in Illinois. I was from the far north suburbs, a little town called Waukegan, Illinois. I was a horrible student in high school, horrible grades, barely graduated with like a 1.24 GPA. I drank underage. My first car was a motorcycle. I used to fight. I used to run from the cops. I got caught by the cops a few times. And then the phone rings, and it's my buddy Andy, and he says, hey, you'll never guess what I did today. And I'm thinking, oh, you crashed another one of your sports cars, because he was a spoiled brat. And I love him to death, but spoiled. He says, I joined the Marines. I said, you did what? He says, yeah, you got to come down here and meet these guys. So, when he's calling me, I remember that day picking up the phone off the wall when we still had wall phones from 662-3427 in Waukegan, Illinois. And I went down, and you know how it is. Anybody that's been in the military, the recruiting office is just placarded with posters and camouflage netting, and these guys are wearing their ribbons and their uniforms, and they talk a mad game. Recruiters in the Marine Corps especially are the best, and they can sell white gloves to a woman eating a ketchup popsicle. It's ridiculous. But the game that they talked, and having led such a very high risk lifestyle as a young adult, I mean, just listening to them, I thought to myself, there is no bigger group of risk takers that I've ever met than these Marines. And that was it. I enlisted. So, I spent, just over 4 years on active duty, went to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, hung up my rifle, drilled in the reserves for a couple of years while I went to Illinois State. And I did much better in college, by the way. 3 years working full time, graduated with a much more respectable GPA. And then, like, everything that happens in the Marine Corps, this young sergeant calls me up who got hold of my package and asked me if I wanted to go to OCS. And I told him that, well, I'm applying to U.S. Federal Marshals, but they're not hiring right now. It's a hiring freeze. So he says, come run a physical, fitness test, and go to Great Lakes and take a physical, and I get you boat space in January. That's what I did. And the rest is history. And I've never run into Sergeant Connor again, but if that sucker is watching this show, thanks to him, man, because he was the guy that lit the fuse to really get me back in the Marine Corps. And I always wanted to, Mark, because I didn't miss the Marine Corps, but I still felt like I had more to give, and I love serving my country in that capacity. And being in the military, you meet so many amazing people, and a lot of people, when I do shows or interviews, they'll always ask me, like, do you miss it? 24 years of your adult life. And I always say the same thing. No, I don't miss it. I do miss the people, but I'm still very connected to the veteran community, still very connected to active duty guys, with what I'm doing now and having 9 irons in the fire. And so, yeah, you miss that. You miss the enormity of it, the ship to shore movements, and, controlling and commanding, hundreds and thousands of troops and aircraft. Like, that's cool. I mean, but, it's also a young man's game. So, I was looking at my battalion, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, and I was reading the bio of the sergeant major that's in charge now. And, he went to boot camp, in 2004.
A gunning, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. It goes by fast, man. So, it's a young man's game, but that, that whole experience, from enlisting to college and getting commissioned, and propelled me some, 15 years later as the commander of Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, when we fought in Ramadi, Iraq in 2006 and 2007 during some of the bloodiest fighting during the war. And that's not a swag or hyperbole. That's fact. We lost more Marines and soldiers in Ramadi than any other city, during this 20-year war in Iraq. And it was not a matter of if we're going to get in a firefight. It was just like how long and how often. It was just the time and place that the insurgency chose or were forced into fighting us. And I think that was a product of the fact that it was during the surge strategy, which President Bush and General Petraeus and General Abizaid, those guys all ordered an additional 20,000 forces. And we were part of the 15th MEU at the time. So when they committed that theater reserve, we were able to really cover down on all the pockets of resistance, because up until that point, it was like a giant game of whack-a-mole. Like, they'd pop up in one city and fight, and then we'd smash them into fine dust, hammer them in the ground, and then they'd resurface in another city with less resistance. So during the surge, we worked for the Army, 11 BCT under Colonel Sean McFarland, and then I worked a couple different task forces. My company was bounced around like scab labor, but we were over 260 Marines strong at one point, more than that with all the attachments I had. And we just went through that town like a wrecking ball. And one of the guys lovingly referred to Echo Company as his blunt instrument of war, because we didn't get in vehicles, we didn't get in tracks, we were foot mobile, and that's how we like to do business. And that experience in Ramadi was unequivocally the pinnacle of my career, because it was, as you know, like being in the Super Bowl of being a grunt. I mean, all the training we do, and it was day on, stay on. I mean, we were, fighting every single day, and we were just lighting up the scoreboard. And it was really an intense experience, very fluid, but also as a commander of that many Marines, it was just a complete honor as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I'm going to show everybody your book again. Remember, Echo and Ramadi by Scott A. Huesing, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, the Magnificent Bastards, but Echo Company, also known as the Longhorns. Scott was in command of 287 Marines over there, lost 10 Marines directly under his charge. The reason why I really like your book, Scott, is because it's not wrote in like a look at me, valorous, I'm the commander and boasting. The way you wrote the book was more for your people and more for the Marines that you led and the support that you provided, to that Army unit. It's one of our combat deployments. You've done many, I've done many. There's always kind of like that one day or the one moment during a deployment that really, really impacts us greatly. I just wanted to ask you, from your experience, what was that moment like for you? What was it?
It goes without saying, when you lose Marines in combat, that's impactful. And we lost 3 Marines in Echo Company, 10 in the battalion across the board on that deployment. But it's impactful to the extent of the definition, and having to call the parents of Marines you've lost. That's impactful. There's also something kind of magical that comes out of that too, because after all of these years, I'm still very connected to those Gold Star families. And, I mean, that's an impact that you see over 2 decades almost, Mark. And it's been, something that I think for a lot of the Marines that lose buddies at such a young age, I think it helps them, and it didn't really dawn on me until I actually wrote the book. And I'm not saying this as part of writing as some catharsis, and I typed the end and I had this, weight off my shoulders. But when I was writing, I really didn't realize how young these Marines were, because they're in most cases 18, 19 years old, like I was in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But as a 35-year-old commander who did a bunch of deployments, been to combat a few times, a lot of life experience, after all of that transpired, I thought, the way I viewed things and the way I compartmentalized all that trauma and friction must be extremely different for a 19-year-old kid. And I think that it took kind of doing over 100 interviews with my guys and making sure the facts were right. Because, if I wrote anything wrong, they would just eat me for breakfast. I mean, it had to be 100% accurate. And what I remember, especially when you're under those intense circumstances in combat, you see things and your vision and memory is yours and yours alone. So when you're writing not only a historical account, so it's factual, but you also want to write the same way that the other Marines remembered it. So there was a lot of back and forth when I started sharing this story, which was a very important story because I never wanted the Battle of Fallujah or Baghdad to be these things that were romanticized over, because the Battle of Ramadi could not have been forgotten. And I wanted to make sure and that was an important thing to me.
Yeah.
And we've seen it, percolate a little bit in mainstream media and in the movies and stuff. So like it's, when we're talking about World War II or Vietnam, you've got Peleliu, Saipan, Okinawa, or Vietnam, Khe Sanh and the Tet offensive. And, Ramadi was one of those battles. And a lot of times it's split up into two. The first Battle of Ramadi in 04 was 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. And then when we had to go back in 06, 07. But I tell everybody who's an academic or a student of war that was really a 2-year battle. I mean, it was so protracted because there were all these highs and lows within the fighting that each unit's experience within that city of over 300,000 people that was just boiling over and spilling into the burners with fighting. Everybody had a different perspective.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, reading your book, Scott, I didn't want to say it for you, but what I picked up, what I thought was very moving and impactful was when you were walking everybody through the Iridium phone call that you made, to Mrs. Libby. That was a tough read. I really had empathy for you and for his family. That's a tough call. Keiko is often one of the most underappreciated, but probably one of the most hardest jobs in the Marine Corps. But as a commander or as a senior enlisted guy who's going to make that phone call, doesn't have to, but should do the right thing and make that phone call. That's a very, very devastating thing to go through. So I admire your courage, man, handling it, handle it like a professional. And, but I know that it was tough for you.
Yeah, but there's so many horrible things that you witness in war, and there's a lot of darkness. And I think that there's a lot of brightness that comes out of it that I've seen and a lot of that comes with age and wisdom and experience. But
Sure.
the beautiful things that are born out of it are friendships and these lifelong bonds with not just the Gold Star families, but those you serve with, and the team that's built. It's just complete adhesion under adversity that brings everyone together. And that's really, really hard to break apart after you've done that multiple times. But again, in Ramadi with those guys, they weren't some special elite force of freedom fighters or Marines. They weren't handpicked. They're just, there was just this remarkable chemistry that we had. And that had nothing to do with me. That had everything to do with the senior enlisted. I had Tom Foster, our company first sergeant, the sergeants and corporals who'd been to Ramadi 18 months before we got there and came back. And then all the lieutenants who were brand new. That leadership at every single level was just the one thing that I couldn't have really baked in to really build a better recipe for having a great organization. So they made it easy on me. And I wouldn't be sitting here doing this show with you because they just took care of me and each other better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And it's really a testament to those guys because they're fighters, man. They're winners. So I'm proud of them, to this day.
No doubt, man. That's great perspective because, a lot of the guys have cycled through the 20-year GWAT war. They get stuck in the mud with it and, they just ruminate nonstop about it and only think about the bad things that happen. And to see the good that comes out of it is a healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
Even though we all have our dark days sometimes, unfortunately, because it's just a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
Mark, we have such a responsibility right now to move past all that darkness and really focus on the positive things veterans are doing. Because I'll tell you what, everybody who's in the Marine Corps out now knows that we're in the middle of an extremely challenging recruiting crisis. And
Yeah.
I think that, let's be honest, how do you inspire the next generation to want to raise their hand and serve when what they've seen portrayed about the military, or after you leave the military? I mean, what 17-year-old kid's going to say, oh, yeah, I'd love to go join the Marines and lose a leg and then not get my benefits or live under a bridge? Yeah, that sounds great. Sign me up. Where do I sign?
Right.
We have to do better. Or drink myself into the bottom of a Scotch bottle, because things are so bad, or we don't transition guys out of the military the right way. We give them a half-baked transition program, or they used to. Now that SkillBridge is along, it's gotten better. But we're still missing the fact that we train guys for 14 weeks to get them into the Marine Corps, but we're lacking the spiritual, the psychological, the mental transition. Yeah, the vocational is important, but it's a holistic view. Just like the Marine Corps, we talk about ethos and, honor and courage and commitment and leadership traits and principles. How are you transitioning guys out? They just don't do it real justice to these young men and women who give, 4 years or 24 years of their adult life. And I think that that's something that needs to get fixed.
I agree. There's I have a blueprint in my head that I've been kicking around for a while, and how perhaps maybe I can help with it. But again, it just depends on what's the reception on the other end. It might be, nothing. I don't know. I mean, the good part is, Scott, that I think that yourself and there's lots of people around the country, us graybeards, that are understanding that gap. So we're sort of handling it on our own rather than wait around for the Marine Corps or for the military to kind of standardize that process for us. So take action and ownership of it.
Yeah, 100%. And you're lighting candles in my church, brother, because I always do like a call to action when I'm speaking, or even in a small group of veterans, because I was introduced to this company called Revy. They created this revolutionary technology. It's like LinkedIn had a baby with TikTok. It's about recruiting, retention, transition, and data collection. It's a private, clean, secure platform. When I met them, I had thought they read General Berger's Force Design 2030 because it covered everything in there. So when I meet these guys, this young Irish guy who migrated to America, and he tells me about this, says, hey, man, I said, have you gotten this in front of the military? He goes, no, why? And I said, well, because the Navy failed to recruit 10,000 people last year. The Air Force failed to recruit 10,000 people. The Marine Corps barely got their chin above the bar. Everybody's struggling. So in the last year, we've gotten this technology in front of every C-suite level general and flag officer and every senior enlisted leader in every service branch to let them get first take at this thing. And we're making really good roads with the Marine Corps right in our old stomping grounds with 12th Marine Corps District down in Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. So, again, I'm not sitting around a VFW crying in my beer, complaining to a bunch of dudes about how screwed up the system is, or these Marines today aren't as tough as we were, or no, they're just as tough. There's just as many challenges. It's just a different landscape, but be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. And, maybe you don't have to become an advisory board on a tech firm. When's the last time you went down to your local high school, JROTC, and volunteered to the coach or whoever it is that runs it and says, hey, I spent 4 years or 24 years in the military. I'd love to talk to these kids just, sometime and tell them about the positive things that came from my military service. And a lot of people do not find time to do that. One of the first places I stopped when I moved to Texas last year was the local college. And I went to the VA Student Affairs office. I said, anytime you guys need me, here's my card, you call me. And they'd have.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, what hate to call everybody out, but we're kind of not like you and I, but guys our age, that are cut from the war are kind of the worst ones out there that promote they just promote a negative tone about it towards the Marines, towards what's going on with force design. And I understand that some of that stuff might not make you happy, but my thing is like, as a veteran and as a Marine Corps retiree, I don't want to make the Marine Corps look weak. I want to promote the Marine Corps as strong, because we need a strong Marine Corps. We need a strong free military to move forward, because freedom isn't free, right? It's not fucking free. We got to have people stick up their right hands and damn continue to friggin' pledge towards protecting our nation. And the more that we shit on it, we're part of the fucking problem.
Yeah, 100%. When I go and talk to groups, I've recently said this, and it's, it's not hyperbole. It is, I guess. I hate even using that word or being considered a master of hyperbole, but I always tell people that this generation of Marines that's in charge right now, I sleep well at night because I trained them, and I know we did the right things. But that message probably going to change if we keep having the same problems in recruiting and we lower standards or we don't meet our force goals. It's going to be a real challenge because someone out there is going to try and pick a fight with us. And as Marines, we know this 100%. We don't want a fair fight ever. We'll never go into a fight. We always want the advantage. We'll never fight a fair fight. We'll cheat. We'll do whatever we can, but we will win. And we can't do that when we're constantly struggling to get the best and brightest talent to do what we did. And yeah, they're going to do it differently than we did it. Every generation is different, but no one ever accuses me of being a generationalist either, because I think there's greatness in every generation. I hate the old graybeards. Not that we aren't in that group or getting close, but they talk about how hard it was on their watch, and they walked uphill to school in both ways, carrying water in the snow. I'm like, no, everybody goes through that. Everybody goes through those challenges, and there's a segment in our population of protectors that will ultimately rise up. They will shine. And the Marines are a great example of that. Obviously, we're a bit biased, but every service branch is doing great things. And I think that if we do get in another conflict, and it's only a matter of time, it's usually about every 10 years. Watch the clock. And I think these young men and women are going to rise to the challenge. Hopefully they have the administrative leadership, which has been lacking. I hope that they have the general and flag officer level leadership that's been under a lot of scrutiny in the last 10 years. I hope that changes. People are fighting for those they lead. I think that's the most important thing, Mark.
Yeah, agreed, man. Agreed. Just got to continue, support. And again, I'm not saying you should blow sunshine and smoke up people's ass and, lie to them and tell them everything, is great. There are some challenges out there. There is some things that are a little bit unfortunate. Probably number one would be, just in my opinion, too much politics being involved in the military, more of an emphasis on war fighting. But at the end of the day, I'm going to friggin' support, because I understand that, the country's, freedoms are at stake for it, period. End of the friggin' road. The Marines and the military are going to have my support. All right. So we dived into a rabbit hole there, but it was a good one. I think that was a good rabbit hole, Scott. So we talked about, your service. We talked about your book. We talked a little bit about, challenges with recruiting. So after you retired, you decided to write your book. Besides the fact that you wanted to ensure that the history of Ramadi was captured, because as well it should be, was there anything like that light bulb moment when you're like, man, I really, really want to write a book? Did you start keeping a journal in combat? How did that unfold?
I did. I've always been an artist, even in growing up as a young kid. And then in college, I was a fine arts minor. But more importantly, I've always liked to write, and writing is a very portable medium. And so, I kept a journal. It wasn't like, I better write this down because my book's going to be great someday. I was just taking notes, and just like your little green notebooks. And I had actually started writing this book towards the end of my career, and someone broke into my car and stole my computer and hard drives and my journal out of my car. And I was devastated, man. I put a sign in my front yard. I'm like, Marines gave their blood for what you stole. Just return it, no questions asked. I was scouring pawn shops. It was gone. It was just lost. But as my mom always said, bless her soul, she's like, things always happen for a reason. And I hated it when she would say that advice. Hated it.
True,
but she was absolutely right, because the way I started writing the book and what occurred after that loss, and what battled through to rewrite the structure of the book. I did it in a better way. I included all those Marines, the families, and it got to the point where when my editor Sylvia read the draft manuscript, she's in tears. She reads the first chapter. She's a Navy brat too, amazing woman. And so Sylvia goes through the whole thing, and she made the same comment that a lot of people did. They said, "This is amazing, the way you describe your Marines, but there's not enough of you in the book." And so I really had to go back and dig deep and kind of pull out some other stories that, they're not, they're not stuff you like to, hang on a shelf in Barnes and Noble. But as an artist and as a Marine, after all those guys had given me so much of themselves, really picked open the scab and bled in front of me so I could recount their stories accurately, I felt I had to give, so I had to share some of those challenges that I incurred and overcame, that were not anything that you're proud of in life. But I think being able to do that made me feel more human. And I think it also really connected me to a lot of the Marines, not just the fact that, I struggled and was challenged with, my share of post-traumatic stress and, pain and injury, but all the funny stuff too. Like I always like it when people bring up the part in the book where I talk about leaving my rifle outside of the chow hall. Like there's not a Marine out there that hasn't left the rifle and felt bad about it. And then, then there's only the ones that get caught or the ones that will admit it. So everyone's out there. But the fact that I can admit that, I think that it kind of resonated with the guys, and everybody that reads. It's a funny story, but I was going on like 3 or 4 days with no sleep and filling sandbags before I had to grab some chow outside of an Army chow hall, and just left the rifle there, and panic shortly ensued as I sat down with my tray of Army food. And luckily, young sergeant again saved my bacon, brother. He has, don't worry, sir, it's right here. So
that's what we do for our fine officers, man. We look out for you, as you know. So everybody out there, all the viewers, veterans, especially, Scott just kind of laid out a blueprint for you on how he kind of unfolded, and wrote his book. So in order to help, drive that point home with people who are possibly interested in this, Scott, let me just ask you this last question. Then we'll move on to what you're doing today. Did you have self-doubt when you were writing this book, going through this process?
No, I always knew that the story had to be told. How I would share that, what perspective I would share it in, I think is something that every writer has to make a decision on. But I never had any doubt that this book was going to be written. Along the way, there is a lot of doubt. Am I going to get an agent? Will it get published in mainstream publishing? Will people buy it? And honestly, I tell everybody this, even the people I have as clients this day, is that, look, you don't get rich by selling books unless your name's James Patterson or Stephen King. Like fiction sells really well. Nonfiction books, you have to have a strategy. And honestly, when I went into this, it wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to do this to be a best-selling author. I did it, and if I sold 250 copies that all of the Marines could have and say, hey, kids or grandkids, like, I'm in this book. Or I'm not in this book, but these guys are emblematic of all the things I did too, because obviously I couldn't write about all 250 guys.
Right.
But there was never any doubt that, and I never had anyone along the way when I was doing the countless interviews that didn't want to participate. Some were a little more tight-lipped than others, but I think that they all understood where I was coming from, and they all knew me. They knew I wasn't cashing in, for lack of a better word, but there was one Marine who I will not mention who wanted compensation to do this interview. I says, hey man, I'm not getting paid anything to do this. I said, you're the first guy that asked me to give him cash. I'm like, so he wasn't in the book.
Be bold, be brave, man. That's what you taught him, right? Ask the hard questions.
And I love it about him because when I'm talking to transitioning vets, I'm always telling them, know your value. Know what your hourly rate is. Know what you're worth, man, because you don't give it away for free.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Hey, man, tell everybody a little bit what you're doing today, man. What you got going on, like right now in your professional life?
Yeah. Aside from working with ReviPro with this amazing HR technology, I also, I mean, man, I've got 9 irons in the fire. I like to really create different opportunities. I still get out and I do a lot of public speaking across the country to, the collegiate level, private sector, military organizations. And I like being able to share my story so people can see it through my lens and then, get better with the challenges and adversity they have in life. I think that's important. And I'm honored to do it. I'm very humbled to do it as well because I get it. Not everybody has the capacity to get up on a stage in front of 5,000 people and pick open the scab and bleed in front of all these strangers. But there's a lot of guys that wish they could, and there's certain people, and I'm fortunate to be one, I guess, that can do that and share those stories. So I think that's important. I think storytelling is important. I'm always writing. I'm writing an article. I just wrote an article the other night about how I don't believe in the word struggle. I feel like I didn't struggle. I never felt like I was struggling in life, although I came from a poor family in Illinois, and my mom raised me and my brother, and the Marine Corps and war and all this. But writing's important. I still do my share of writing. I work as a literary agent. I've sold countless books by other veteran authors. I've got civilian clients now that I work with. And then I started a company here in Texas called solidcopymedia to really help coach and mentor aspiring writers who are veterans primarily, first responders, government experts. But we've had civilians come on board too. And what was interesting is I just did it as a side hustle. Really not even a side hustle, but I would get emails from total strangers asking me to read their book. I'm like, and I had to develop this skill, kind of like listening. No. Saying no was so hard for me because I wanted to read it, but I don't have 10 hours of my life to read 300 pages of what might surmount to a total pile of garbage. So I just had to say no. And then there's people that would say, hey, would you consider reading a sample of my writing? And they'd butter me up a little bit because everybody likes their ego stroked, or at least acknowledge that you're a writer. And sometimes I would read those, and I started representing people and selling their books to major publishing houses because I have connections. I have friends. I don't like calling them connections. They're friends who are senior executives in the publishing industry. And if a story's worth being told, I like being a part of that. And yeah, I get, commission as well as an agent because I do a lot of work. And these writers that we've brought on board with Solid Copy Media, anybody listening that might be watching the show that thinks they have a book in them, or you've been to a party and someone says, man, you should write a book about that. Or you're like, I'm going to write a book about that. You got to do it. You're either that guy at the party that says he's going to do it. Go to solidcopymedia.com and see this laundry list, this whole team of best-selling authors, former publishing house executives, freelance writers, podcasters, publicists. All of these people are my friends who joined the team to not only give you an education, which I don't charge that much money for, but what you really get when I bring these people through this course, which is only 10 modules, it's about writing a book from everything from writing work to marketing, agents and houses, guerrilla marketing, launching the book, the story arc, character development, all of these things that I had to learn through countless searches and seminars and all this. We brought all these guys together, but what they really get is access.
Yeah.
Access. Because you can't just reach out to a literary agent and have a phone call, or a ghostwriter, or if they have a question, once they become part of the team, they have access their whole life. Questions they have about a step they're at in the process, but everything we put together has just been based off of years of experience from all of the best-selling authors that I brought in who've sold tens and tens of thousands of books with hundreds of thousands of 5-star reviews. I mean, it's cool, and much like you, thinking back to those yellow footprints that we both stepped on, that we'd be sitting here today doing so many things and meeting so many interesting people to add value, not just for our lives, but being able to share that with other people. I think that's what I love most. And so when you ask me what I'm doing after I wrote the book or post Marine Corps, it's like I'm always trying to do something else. And I know people like to talk about the book, but that's what I did. What I'm doing now is continuing to lead, continuing to inspire other people to challenge themselves. I think it's important because as you get older, I'm 54. You get a little stagnant. So I like to stay moving every day. I like to read every day or educate myself every day. I like to put myself in an uncomfortable position every single day. Maybe it's going to talk to high school students, man. I'm telling you, that's uncomfortable when you're 54 because the look that they have from that crowd of 500 people, it's like you feel like,
am I relating to these folks?
Yeah, you feel like an alien. And but the last thing I like to do every day is try and help someone else or someone besides myself. And that might be something as simple, Mark, as, oh, I forgot that this guy wanted me to connect him to this guy. And I share a contact. In essence, at its lowest level, you're helping someone else. It doesn't have to be donating $5,000 in United Way. So I think that if you can move on from the military and still have an ethos and goals and a leadership philosophy for yourself, I think that's important. Because I tell you, when I was commanding hundreds of troops in combat or disembarking thousands of guys off the MEU and amphibious shipping, honestly, man, that's easier than waking up every day and having to lead this team because that's who I report to. I mean, I'm surrounded by a lot of people that help me, but at the end of the day and at the beginning, it's me. I have to motivate myself. I have to be disciplined in my eating, drinking, fitness, writing, everything I do, business, holding myself accountable, holding other people accountable, because that's how you become successful when you leave the Marine Corps. And there's nothing wrong with going to work for a large company, but for those that want to really transform themselves or do something different, you have to maintain that discipline. I hate the word self-discipline. There's no need for 4 letters and a hyphen. It's just discipline. You either have it and use it, or you do not. You're either disciplined or undisciplined. I think any drill instructor watching the show could agree with that.
I think I'm getting as much out of this as any viewer is going to get, because as I'm sitting over here, lightly sipping on my bourbon, talking to you, I'm like, oh man, looking in the mirror, looking at myself in this. I'm like, whoa, I was jacked up. Two really important points. It was all important what you say, but 2 things that I think that really, really stood out to me for those that are listening as well. One, the brain is like a mind. We often focus on, our bodies, our biceps, looking good for the beach, looking good for girls and all that stuff. But indeed, the brain is a large muscle that needs to continually be exercised. Scott exercised his through writing, through giving back, through speaking, and all these things. So, hey, whatever it is that you can do to exercise that, please continue that and keep on working on your mind, because you got to keep on feeding that thing. It's like a gun that needs bullets all the time. And the other thing I would say that's very, very important is that since when do we ever go on a mission, and not prepare for it? We don't do rehearsal of concepts drills. We don't do planning behind it. We don't do walkthroughs. We don't ensure that we do 5-paragraph orders and that everybody knows what they're supposed to do and then go on patrol. So if you're gonna step out and do a venture, whether it's write a book, do a podcast, do anything that's a little bit outside the norm, side hustle, whatever, have a plan. And that's what Scott's offering. He's offering you guys, a way, to help channel your thoughts and plan towards success, rather than just write stuff on a piece of paper and then forget about it a couple months later. So I appreciate that, Scott.
You hit the nail on the head. You have to write things down. You have to have a business plan. And I think that the other thing that came out of this, the whole way I started the company, by the way, was not just random strangers hit me up, but I had a friend hit me up, and he was a really good writer, and he's a Marine, of course. But I says, hey, look, man, I can't give you years and years of experience in an hour phone call. I said, it's just going to be a waste of our time. And I said, let me start putting some notes together about the process. So I created what has become this 10-part syllabus. And so I said, look, man, just Venmo me some cash. I said, because my time is valuable, and I know yours is too. And I said, but if you're going to be serious about this, I only want to work with pros. I don't like to work with hobbyists. I said, so you Venmo me, a couple $100 every time we talk, and I'll give you everything I know. And then we did that, and we built the program. And you want to know the best thing that came out of it? Not just, again, guys are getting an amazing education about this industry and the entertainment business, but it is the best bullshit filter I've ever created in my life. Because all those guys who say, yeah, I was going to write a book, or, hey, would you read my book? And I go, yeah, go to the website, look at the courses, see what you're capable of doing, and we'll talk about the time. And then when they see they have to actually pay money, and I never hear from them again, I'm like, perfect.
Right.
Self-correcting problem. But it's, I don't, and I am 100% honest when I say this. I am not doing it for the money. I don't need the money. Okay. I do it because you have to hold people accountable, and people need to understand that you have to invest in yourself. So if you spend 4 years or 24 years in the military and you were an infantry guy and you say, I want to go out and I want to be a mechanic, but you don't have any mechanics training, before you can turn a wrench, you need to pay a trade school, whatever, couple $1,000 to get that little ASE certified patch before you crack open someone's hood and drain their oil. Same thing with writing. So the people that really are pros or have a passion for it know that, hey, I don't want to go to a 4-year university to learn how to write. You don't have to. Trust me. I went to Illinois State. I was not an English major. I barely graduated high school, but through a slow, steady applied pressure, that's how greatness is achieved. That's how diamonds are made. And a lot of the people we've coached, it's just really cool, man, when you see the end result and you see their work, or they get published, or, I see them on social media doing great things. It's very gratifying. So I think that's why we got into it. And then I met my partner, Ben Sledge, who was actually a Army PsyOps kid. I didn't even remember him, and he wrote about me in his book, Where Cowards Go to Die. And I just thanked him. I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, and I was in your command. I go, I don't remember you, man. I had hundreds of dudes in and out. He goes, yeah, you actually gave us some awards. I go, I don't remember that either. But he found out about what I was doing. And then he, as a web designer and an author and everything Ben does, created the website for solidcopymedia.com. And it's awesome. I mean, he almost did it in his sleep. But Ben was really the guy that, kind of pushed me to formalize a little bit more. And I love doing it. So it's great to be able to give back to, those that have a lot of stories to tell.
I can sense your passion, through the other side of the screen, and that's what it's all about, man. Finding that thing and continuing to give back to each other. I've taken up a lot of your time, and so appreciative that you would, join me. It's good to see your face, man, and it's good to talk to you in person. But I just wanted to throw it over to you for for any last nuggets of wisdom, any last little bits of information, before we shut it down for the night, man. Over to you, brother.
I'd stay on the call with you for hours, man. This could be like a Joe. This could be a Joe Rogan experience. I wouldn't care. Honestly, I would I love it. It's the bromance that came out of it all. But I don't again like to be considered a master of hyperbole. So I save all the pithy points of wisdom and stuff. But it's just it's cool when you get involved with a lot of different things outside of the military. I will share this experience too. Is I found that by connecting with different organizations, insurance groups, the International Convention of Crematoriums and Funeral Homes Associations, colleges, you name. I've been involved with so many different groups, and that meets my third criteria is putting myself in an uncomfortable position. But when I leave those things, I feel like I've taken more than I gave when I interact with these people, and I think that that's a real challenge for people to do, especially guys in the military. You don't even have to be in the military. Everybody gets in their rut and they don't force themselves out to do different things or experience different cultures or different organizations, different styles of leadership. I love doing that throughout my life. And I'm very lucky that I have the capacity to do that. And the bandwidth as well, because I really think that as I continue to get older, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, because when I was talking to a buddy of mine, Josh Montz, we were talking about how I was riding my motorcycle across the country, and he had done this Dead Sea, like self deep dive. And he came up with this mind blowing theory. He's like, I thought one time when I was riding my Harley, in the last 50 years of my life, I have done so much cool stuff. I have learned so much. And I'm blazing down the highway in East Texas, and I'm thinking about this. It's deep, man. It's almost about to rain, and the sky's dark. But then I thought, what happens in the next 50 years? What if I have another 50 years of as much cool experience? But Josh Montz, who is an Army vet, he was shot in the leg, almost died, bled out. He was dead for 12 minutes, and became a best-selling author as well. Josh Montz, Beauty of a Darker Soul. Josh says, no, man, the next 50 years is going to be different, because if X is time, meaning the last 50 years, now that is multiplied by or Y is the experience. So X plus Y equals Z. He says, but X is different, because now X is combined with Y, and what you get on the other end is going to be totally different. So it's compressed. So all the experience that you've garnered up till that point of X moves forward. So he's blowing my mind. We're eating burritos in Vegas, man. I'm like, this is an esoteric fucking burrito, Josh. Like, I love being with you. But you think about that, it's like, because I think it's interesting, because all that experience too, it might limit you to some of those new experiences, because you're a little guarded. I'm not jumping off the weather deck of a merchant marine ship in the Red Sea as a lance corporal. Like, that's not happening again. Like, it's just not smart to jump 70 feet off a ship into shark infested waters for fun as a lance corporal coming back from a war. Not smart. So yeah, I wouldn't do that again. So maybe that theory or formula limits me or limits people later in life. But you need to think about that in perspective as you get a little bit older. So I will leave it at there, and I will say thank you. I love you. I love what you're doing. I love the people you have on this show, and Semper Fi to all the Marines and everybody that served, and keep up the fire.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. The thing that I like, one of the things I admire a lot about you, Scott, and a lot of the other guys is because, you guys are crushing the whole theory when we're speaking about transition, about, the traditional transition. I'm the traditional transition guy. I retire, I get a job, I'm in federal government, I work for the Navy and the Marine Corps. It's safe. Lucky for me, I like it, which is good. And just don't have to do it, right? But like guys like you and other guests I've had in the show are just smashing that theory to pieces, by going out there, pursuing your passions, doing different things. And it really shows all the viewers and a lot of veterans out there that there's just so many different paths that you can take. And guess what? The guys that we bring on the show will potentially mentor you if you would like them to, and they will help soften your landing on the way out and help you develop a blueprint towards your success. So Scott, it's truly appreciated. Again, everybody, I just wanted to remind you about the book here. I know he's going to get mags. I've shown it for the third time. Battle of Ramadi with Scott A. Huesing. Scott is on Facebook. He's on LinkedIn, and you heard him talk about his companies, this evening. Do a Google search. You will find all of his information out there. Sir, it's been my honor and my pleasure to host you. It's good to see your face again, and I love you as well. To all the viewers out there, hey, appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you for all your support. We're going to continue moving forward. Be bold, be brave, be exceptional, and go out there and get after it. Effort equals results. Let's friggin' go. Take care now. Good night.